How good was Graeme Langlands? That is the question 7 NRL legends were asked, and their answers revealed something nobody expected. They all called him great. They all called him tough. But they also exposed the darkness behind the greatness, the moodiness, the stubbornness, the personality that made him a nightmare to play with, and the single most humiliating day in Australian Rugby League history. A day when white boots became a symbol of disaster. A day when an immortal became a passenger. This is the story of a man who dominated the game but could not escape his own demons. If you are into these old school NRL stories, hit the hype on this video so more fans can find it. Bob Fulton said it best. He called Graeme Langlands the best all-around player the game ever had. A presence player. A man who could win a match single-handedly. When Langlands was on the field, you felt it. He did not need to talk. He did not need to yell. He just existed in a way that made everyone else lift. That was the magic. That was the greatness. But the same greatness came with a cost that turned teammates into enemies, a cost that turned victories into arguments, a cost that ended with the most infamous blunder in grand final history. Graeme Langlands was not always this way. He was born in Wollongong in 1941. His childhood was not easy. His father was an alcoholic. The home was unstable. There was no therapy, no counseling, just survival. Young Graeme learned to keep his feelings locked inside. He became shy, introspective, defensive. The rugby league field became his only outlet, the only place he could express himself. By the time he was a teenager, he was already known for being quiet off the field and ruthless on it. That ruthlessness was not cruelty. It was survival. It was the only language he knew. The working-class post-war Australia he grew up in did not make room for emotional vulnerability. Boys were taught to be tough, to bury pain, to channel everything into physical competition. Langlands took that lesson to heart. Every tackle was a release. Every sidestep was an escape. Every point he scored was proof that he mattered, that he could control something in a life that felt out of control. His teammates at Wollongong saw a fiery young player who played like his life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. He joined St. George in 1963. The Dragons were in the middle of their legendary 11-year premiership dynasty. Icons like Reg Gasnier, Johnny Raper, and Norm Provan were already there. Langlands was the shy kid trying to find his place. But as the old stars faded, Langlands became the leader. Not through words, not through charisma, through presence, through will. His leadership style was nothing like Reg Gasnier. Gasnier was magical, warm, charismatic, a natural role model. Langlands was silent, surly, demanding. He did not inspire through speeches. He inspired through fear, through an uncompromising will to win that terrified his own teammates as much as it terrified opponents. The contrast between Gasnier and Langlands defined an era. Gasnier retired gracefully after injury. He knew when to step away. Langlands never learned that lesson. Gasnier led with grace and ethereal dominance. Langlands led with ruthless demands. When Gasnier spoke, people listened because they wanted to. When Langlands spoke, people listened because they were afraid not to. Both men were champions. Both were Dragons legends, but they represented opposite philosophies of leadership. One was loved, the other was feared. And fear, as Langlands would prove, could take you far, but it could also destroy you. 7 legends spoke about him. Their words painted a picture of brilliance wrapped in bitterness. Let me tell you what they said, starting from the last one. Number 7, John Grant. He played alongside Langlands in the 1972 World Cup. Grant admitted that Langlands was not everyone's cup of tea. He was reticent, distant. He led through action, not words. English crowds saw him as an arch-villain. They feared him. They hated him. Even in Australia, many found him hard to like. Grant said you had to understand the character to appreciate him, but understanding him was not easy. His default setting was distance, potential hostility. You had to work to get close. Most people did not bother. Grant saw something others missed. Beneath the hostility was a man who cared deeply about winning, who felt every loss like a personal failure, who carried the weight of expectation in silence. But that insight required patience. It required looking past the moody exterior. Most people never got that far. They saw the scowl, the silence, the cold shoulder, and they moved on. Number 6, Billy Smith. Smith and Langlands formed a legendary partnership for 14 seasons. They played together, they won together. But Smith admitted they argued a lot, constantly. Langlands was hot-headed, petulant. He held grudges. On the 1967 Kangaroo Tour, the two of them got into so much trouble they were fined their full bonuses. Their relationship was a love-hate dynamic. They respected each other, but they clashed hard. Smith was his closest ally on the field, but even Smith found him difficult. Even Smith could not escape the moodiness. The partnership worked because both men were fiery. Both refused to back down. When they argued, it was explosive. But when they clicked on the field, they were unstoppable. Smith understood Langlands in a way few others did. He knew the anger came from a place of caring, that the arguments were never personal. They were about standards, about excellence, about refusing to settle. But that knowledge did not make it easier. It just made it bearable. Number 5, Steve Edge. Edge was a teammate at St. George. He gave Langlands the most famous nickname, the world champion for getting the shits. Langlands was notoriously grumpy, moody, downcast. If something went wrong, he would brood. If a teammate made a mistake, he would let them know, with silence, with glares, with an atmosphere so heavy it crushed the dressing room. Edge said everyone still recognized his greatness afterward, but the daily reality of being around him was exhausting. The social cost was high. Edge saw the toll it took on younger players. The ones who looked up to Langlands but were terrified to approach him. The ones who made mistakes and spent the rest of the game waiting for his disapproval. Edge himself was tough enough to handle it, but he wondered what the team could have been if Langlands had been just a little warmer, just a little more forgiving. The talent was there, the wins were there, but the joy was often missing. Number 4, Arthur Beetson. Beetson played against Langlands in the lead-up to the 1975 Grand Final. In the semi-final, Beetson flattened Langlands with a high tackle. It was brutal. Langlands admitted he was still feeling the concussion a week later. He should not have played in the Grand Final, but he did, and Beetson made him pay. In that final, Beetson was brilliant. Langlands looked ordinary, injured, slow, a shadow of himself. Beetson exposed what happens when stubbornness meets reality. Beetson knew Langlands was hurt. Everyone knew, but Langlands would never admit it. His pride would not allow it. So Beetson targeted him, hit him hard, made him move, made him prove he could still play. And Langlands could not. Every hit exposed the injury. Every step showed the pain. Beetson later said he respected Langlands for trying, but trying was not enough. Not against a team as ruthless as Eastern Suburbs. Not when your own body was betraying you. Number 3, John Sattler. Sattler praised Langlands for one thing, the ability to play through immense physical pain. For Sattler, that was a mark of elite toughness, but it was also a warning sign. Langlands viewed physical vulnerability as a personal insult, something to be conquered, not managed. He refused to admit weakness. He refused to listen to doctors. He refused to accept limits. That refusal led directly to the 1975 disaster. The same toughness Sattler admired became the flaw that destroyed him. Sattler himself had played with a broken jaw in the 1970 Grand Final. He understood toughness. He understood playing through pain. But even Sattler knew there were limits. There were injuries you could play through and injuries you could not. The difference was knowing which was which. Langlands never learned that distinction. To him, all pain was a challenge. All injury was something to overcome. And that mindset worked until it did not. Number 2, Ron Coote. Coote replaced Langlands as Australian captain in 1970 when Langlands broke his hand. Coote respected him. He called him ruthless, one of the toughest players he ever saw. But ruthlessness came with a dark side, a win-at-all-costs attitude that lacked empathy, that crushed teammates, that left no room for error. Coote led with balance. Langlands led with demands. The friction between their styles defined the Kangaroos' leadership transitions in the early 70s. Coote saw the greatness, but he also saw the cost. Coote believed leadership should lift people up. Langlands believed leadership should push people to their limits. Both approaches worked. Both produced results. But Coote's style built loyalty. Langland's style built fear. And when the pressure was on, fear could be powerful, but it could also fracture a team. Coote watched Langlands demand perfection from players who were already giving everything. He watched him glare at mistakes instead of encouraging recovery. And Coote wondered if winning was worth the emotional wreckage left behind. Number 1, Bob Fulton. Fulton was an immortal himself. He called Langlands the best all-round player in history, a bloke who could win games single-handedly. But even Fulton admitted Langlands was hard to know. He was a presence player, not a people person. There was a barrier, a distance. Playing with Langlands meant playing with someone whose moodiness filled the room like smoke. And Fulton delivered the harshest criticism of all. He said Langlands was a passenger in the 1975 Grand Final, the greatest player reduced to dead weight because of stubbornness. Fulton meant it as a clinical observation, not an insult, just a fact. On that day, Langlands was a liability. His presence, which usually elevated the team, became an anchor. Fulton saw a man too proud to admit he could not play, too stubborn to step aside, and it cost the Dragons everything. Fulton respected Langlands, but he also learned from him. He learned that greatness without self-awareness was dangerous, that toughness without wisdom was reckless, that sometimes the bravest thing a leader could do was step back. That grand final, that is where everything collapsed. Langlands went into the match injured, a chronic groin problem. He needed a pain-killing injection to play, but the injection went wrong. The needle hit a nerve that had shifted because of scar tissue. His entire leg went numb. He could barely move. He should have stayed off the field, but he did not. He refused. The injection was supposed to save him. Instead, it destroyed him. In his autobiography, Langlands admitted the needle went in where the nerve should not have been. The result was catastrophic. His leg felt like dead weight. He could not feel the ground beneath him, could not cut, could not step, could not do any of the things that made him great. He was a shell, a ghost, a captain in name only. And then there were the boots. Bright white Adidas boots. In an era when everyone wore black, Langlands chose white. Commentator Rex Mossop joked that he looked ready to play cricket. The white boots acted like a spotlight. Every clumsy step, every missed tackle, every failure was magnified. When Langlands failed to find touch with an early penalty kick, the crowd knew. His teammates knew. The immortal was broken. The white boots were a commercial decision. Adidas wanted visibility. Langlands wanted the endorsement, but the timing was disastrous. If he had played well, the boots would have been iconic. Instead, they became a symbol of failure. A bright white reminder that even legends fall. Even immortals bleed. The crowd at the Sydney Cricket Ground watched in horror as the man they worshipped stumbled around the field like a stranger. Every white boot was a beacon. Every step was agony. Every moment was humiliation. At halftime, Dragons secretary Frank Facer begged him to stay off. Facer had a father-son relationship with Langlands. He cared about him. He saw the injury. He saw the disaster unfolding. But Langlands got angry, surly, abrasive. He argued. He refused to listen. His pride would not let him accept help. His win-at-all-cost mentality would not let him step aside. So he went back out, and eastern suburbs destroyed them. 38-0. 7 tries conceded. The worst humiliation in grand final history. Langlands later admitted it was his greatest regret. But by then, the damage was done. The humiliation did not end his career immediately. Pride pushed him to return in 1976, but his performance was mediocre. He played 4 games. 1 season too many. Then he retired, the final chapter of a man who could not accept decline, who could not step aside gracefully, who had to keep fighting even when the fight was already lost. Graeme Langlands was not easy to like. He was not warm. He was not charismatic. He did not lead through inspiration. He led through fear, through demands, through a win-at-all-cost mentality that crushed everyone around him, including himself. But he was also the best all-around player of his generation. He scored 206 points for Australia, a record that stood until Mal Meninga broke it in 1992. He scored 1,554 points for St. George. He kicked 648 goals for the Dragons. He led the competition in point scoring in 1971 and 1973. He was the first player to top 100 points in Ashes history. His sidestep was legendary. A 2-meter leap at full speed that broke defensive lines. Defenders could not read it, could not stop it. It was a move born of instinct and perfected through ruthless repetition. He played his first 4 Test years at center to accommodate other fullbacks. Then he moved to fullback, where his graceful, balanced running could dominate. He was versatile, tough, agile. He played through pain that would have ended other careers. He demanded excellence from himself and everyone around him. He set a standard that few could meet. And when the legends gathered in 1985, they still picked him. Because greatness is complicated. Because leadership is not always kind. Because the man who terrified you could also be the man you respected most. Langlands was awarded an MBE in 1976. He became the 5th immortal in 1999. But his later years were marked by tragedy, dementia, Alzheimer's. A slow fade for a man who had been a presence player his entire life. His funeral in 2018 drew hundreds. Teammates, opponents, fans, people who had clashed with him, people who had feared him, people who had loved him from a distance. They all came to say goodbye. Because despite the moodiness, despite the white boots disaster, despite the arguments and the grudges, he mattered. He changed the game. He set a standard. He proved that leadership did not have to be likable to be effective. The 7 legends told the truth. He was great. He was tough. He was also surly, stubborn, and difficult. And that is exactly what made him an immortal. His legacy is not clean. It is not simple. It is a paradox. A man who could not connect with people but commanded their respect. A man who pushed teammates away but made them better. A man who suffered the greatest humiliation in grand final history but was still chosen as captain 9 years later. That is Graeme Langlands. Not perfect, Not easy, but unforgettable. Like, subscribe, and comment your take on his legacy.